Good afternoon, everyone. Muito boa tarde para todos. Just a couple of words in Portuguese. This session will be in English. Muito boa tarde, bem-vindos àqueles que nos acompanham. A sessão será em inglês, mas obviamente que poderão ligar as legendas e acompanharem em português também, se quiserem. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Simpósio-Filamentos of the Atlantic Heritage. We've been very fortunate to have lots of folks join us on various social media platforms. This is our third day, and as of this morning, we've had over 10,000 viewers, which is great because it's not topics that sometimes people want to, that's unfortunately that bring lots and lots of people. But I'm always thrilled that the Portuguese American community and others who are not of Portuguese American background but are interested in literature and culture and that take part in our sessions. So, Filaments of the Atlantic Heritage Symposium that we began in person in 1990. Our guest was just a baby, but it was in 1990 that we began this in person at here in Tulare, of all places, with a group of writers from different parts of the world and the Portuguese world, I should say. And it was a 10-year project that continued for 12 years until 2002. It ended, and then all of a sudden, with the pandemic, some of the people that had participated, enticed me to bring it back as a virtual event, and we did. And so this is our fourth one since the pandemic, so a total of 16 so far. And as I mentioned, just a brief intro. So we gather at this time and as a part of memory and a part of vision, and where the winds of the Atlantic carry the voices of the islands. And to me, the islands mean exactly resilience and creativity. Filaments of the Atlantic Heritage is more than a symposium. We'd like to believe that, and that is a living mosaic of heritage, a tribute to the enduring spirit of the Açorian people and their diaspora voyages across the Americas. So our symposium has featured folks and talks and participation from California to Brazil, from British Columbia to Bermuda, from classroom settings to live streams. We braid together the threads of culture, intellect, and creativity. Our vision is cultivating a space where the Azorian soul can speak in many tongues through poetry, prose, scholarship, journalism, performance, and conversation. And we Azorians love the conversation part. So, doing so ignites a transatlantic dialogue that affirms identity, that honors ancestry, and hopefully, and possibly more important, that inspires the future. And talk about inspiration. We have Melinda Medeiros, who is our guest for this session. Melinda teaches creative writing, and she teaches literature, and she teaches at Clovis Community College. She has taught also at Fresno State, where she has her Master's of Fine Arts. She's been involved in all kinds of literary aspects at Fresno State through clubs and associations, and we're happy to have her. She is a third generation, I believe, was her grandparents were immigrants, so second born here in the United States of America, and she will be sharing, of course, her story with us and some of her writing as well. So Melinda, first and foremost, welcome. Thank you so much. It's a tough time of the year for educators. I appreciate that you're here.
Yes, well, thank you for having me, Denise. I know that, I mean, I can't even imagine your schedule. I've been able to tune in a little bit over the past few days, and it's just amazing that you bring everyone together, and it's a real legacy that you all are creating. And I know I appreciate it as a descendant of, the Azorean people. So, yeah,
It is.
thank
Well,
you
thank
for
you so much. Yeah,
having me.
thank you. It's great, and it's good that of course these events are also archived at the Fresno State Library as part of our oral history program. So hopefully it'll be meaningful, not just today, but hopefully even meaningful 25, 50 years from now as well. Tell us a little
Definitely.
bit about writing. I know writing is an important part of who you are, of your life. I mean, it's not just from a professional aspect that, folks usually don't go to a Master of Fine Arts because they want to go make $1 million the next week. And so
Yeah.
that's a different master. That's an MBA.
Yes, yes, exactly.
But tell
Um,
us how you got it. What made you what enticed you into writing, basically?
I think probably the origins come from being a granddaughter of immigrants, right? one of the key ways to hold on to culture and identity and rituals and all that is through storytelling. That's the one thing that all immigrants can carry with them. And so, as a child, as a child who loved to read and to love to listen to the adults tell stories, I think that that attraction to storytelling was embedded into me. So, it started as a young child journaling, and then I actually did run away from it for a long time because I am also the granddaughter of immigrants. And I'm sure you're familiar. Azorean immigrants, we were very practical people. The refrain, there's a lot of starving artists, I heard many times in my childhood. So even though my Eval loved to read, and she's the one who first got me a lot of the classic books. She herself was a teacher and educated in the Azores first, and then in California when they moved here. Um, there there always needed to be a practical element of whatever you're going to do. So even though I have an MFA in writing, I also teach, right? And yeah, so anyways, that's a little bit of the background. But I do love telling stories about my family. I feel like um, not only do I record them for my children and potentially other descendants or even like my extended family, but there in each and every one story there is a point of connection for everybody throughout the world. Or that's how we record our humanity. All of humanity is functions off of storytelling, off of narratives. So that's it.
Well, some of the as you said, you like to write about your family, about your
Mhm.
experiences, about the immigrant, the sharing of stories, the identity, the mixture of identities, obviously,
Mhm.
because parents being American born. Was it and that aspect of your grandmother loving to read, which is interesting because a lot of times there's this myth that Azorians didn't read, but really
Yes.
Azorians have always been readers, have always been actually storytellers because
Yes.
they love to tell stories.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely experienced that. And she told me that she got her love of reading from her father. And so my great grandfather was not an educated man. He was we call it a deep sea diver, but he was really like a deep sea construction worker, with the big heavy suits and the hoses of oxygen and all of that. But she said he read the newspaper every day. I think he's the one who encouraged her to become educated. Yeah, so even though we are, very practical and not historically a highly educated population, it didn't mean that we weren't storytellers, we weren't readers and writers. So when I, as an adult traveling to the Azores, I definitely discovered that there is such a rich history of creative writing in the Azores.
When you and of course you've taken lots of courses throughout your academic world about writing and are these essential? I mean, obviously they are very important, but I mean, how did they help you as a writer? Some of these courses and some of the writing courses that you take, especially, of course, as you prepared for your MFA, because sometimes one of the toughest thing is the criticism, and it's and professors, now that you're a professor, you're probably different, and I know you are because I saw you in a classroom setting, but a lot of there's this myth that professors just love to criticize, and to say it's not this way, it's that way. Not all of us had that. I had some great mentors, but how was that from someone who in early childhood or and early on liked the journaling, maybe got away from it, but now going to college, what did that help you as a process, the reading obviously is important because, as the writer told me this morning from the Azores, she said she's never taken any formal I mean, she has a
Mhm.
bachelor's, but it's not in literature.
Right.
And so she said, basically, I became a writer because I read voraciously. And
Mhm.
most of our writers, just Saramago, that won the Nobel Prize in Portuguese, as you know, was had a degree in business and basically also was from reading. So
Yeah.
how did that process come to you, and was the MFA an important part of it as well?
Yeah, I think for me personally, what the MFA program helped me with is the discipline to actually write them all down and organize the stories in some sort of logical way. It helped me identify which techniques I was already using or learned how to use that are particularly engaging. It helped me play with different styles and tones. Um, and it just made me more aware. Like I could already going into the MFA program pick out good writing and I could produce good writing, but it helps me be able to identify and be aware of what exactly is the formula, like what made that good writing. So which I think with people who read so much, it just becomes second nature. It's almost like learning a language, as a child, it gets ingrained into you. So you know it's good, but you don't necessarily know why. It's like my father speaks Portuguese, but he was never educated. Like it was his first language, so he can speak it, but he can't always like translate everything for you because he just knows that it's more instinctually, right? It's
Right.
kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just I perfectly understand that because some of the students that know a little bit of Portuguese, when I explain them sometimes it's a rule to a why it's this way, they say, "Well, I never thought of it that way. I just know how to use
Yeah.
it. I don't know why it's like that." So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just second nature. So do you mind reading one of the pieces that you have chosen for us? I know that you have a couple of pieces for us, so we'd like to maybe do a little bit of reading, and then we'll talk a little bit more and do a second reading if you don't mind doing that. And
Yeah,
tell
absolutely.
us a little bit about what you're gonna read to us. What's the story?
Okay, so when you contacted me about tonight, you made a mistake and you asked me to read some poetry, and now everyone's going to suffer because of that.
Okay.
No, I actually, so as far as recently, and I am going to read some stuff that I have written that I have worked on over the years, but the most recent pieces that I had written, I have two pieces of poetry and sort of a micro essay, or a flash essay,
So
that,
let me ask you a
yeah.
question then. So poetry is new for you, or is it something that you used to kind of did go back and forth? I mean,
Poetry is something that I usually avoid because my mother writes poetry.
yeah.
Um, my mother writes poetry, but she writes like the really perfect, and this is true to who my mother is, the very nice, perfectly rhyming poetry and all of that. And I like more of the messy, free form, raw feelings type of poetry. And so I have taken two poetry courses, aside from creative nonfiction, memoirs, essays. Poetry is kind of what I instinctually fall back on, or sometimes my essays start out as like a raw and rough poem, and then I flesh it out into an essay. So that's my dirty little secret.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, and it is interesting because I feel like there's so many wonderful Azorian poets. So I don't know if it's something in our DNA, but I don't usually share it with the world. But you guys all get to hear a
Yes.
little bit of it tonight, just because it is part of my writing process. Like I said, oftentimes it starts off as poetry, and I do have this theme that I pulled from, like, of water, since we're island people. Waters obviously plays a huge role in our lives and in a lot of my writing as well, because I grew up on a ranch that had a creek, and that is one of like the central themes to a lot of the essays within that manuscript. So okay.
Hey, let's go your poetry. I'm very excited because this morning one of the writers that we had from the Azores, of Lina da Silveira, from the island of San Miguel, born in the island of San Miguel, her father from San Miguel, her mother from Flores, and she actually lived like for I believe Evelina lived almost 30 years in Canada and British Columbia, and then retired and went back to San Miguel, and has now a publishing house that we're actually dealing with her as well. And she's written. Always knew her as a poet, and she told me that she's been writing fiction for a long time, but the opposite of you. She felt at ease with poetry and just
Yeah.
was very secure about her fiction. So
Oh, okay.
until
Yeah.
now, yeah,
Okay.
she says it's easier for her to do a poem, although she says things that sometimes it's harder, but for her it's easier than
Yeah.
to then develop a full, novella or short story or even she has a couple of small novels, but she said it's just she always felt intimidated. She this is kind of her words, not mine. She said,
Yeah. No, I get
I
it.
always felt the fiction writers were real writers and poets, so we would just wrote some things down.
See, yeah, I do feel like the poets are the real writers because I mean, working poets, they condense everything that I put on pages and pages of work into, a couple of stanzas and how they accomplish that. I mean, I touch it sometimes, but not very often.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
excited to listen to it.
Okay, so this was written, I last November, I was inspired on a particular day to write a couple. I wrote these two poems and the micro essay. And I know, yeah, during times of turmoil, a lot of people who have a creative tendency turn to that creativity or that art to kind of get us through that. So, and I feel like we're still in the midst of it, so it's appropriate. All right. Okay, so this one is called Bliss. To whom it may concern, is it really more blissful to be ignorant? Do you really not know that you're drowning? When you stare up and see blue, do you think only how beautiful it is? Do you feel secure in the knowledge that this place you're in is what's good and right because the man who kicked you out of the boat told you so? A euphoric deprivation of oxygen, a gentle sinking into the depths, convinced that you'll wake up in the safety of your protector's arms. It might be more blissful than this violent thrashing, fighting for life and oxygen and my goddamn right to be on the lifeboat. But some of us cannot go back to that blissful state, cannot go back to admiring our last glorious glimpse of sunlight and sky. We watched as they drowned the others. We saw the bodies sink, the sharks circle. There is no one coming to rescue you.
Fantastic. I
So
love
that's
I love the
I'm
peeking into the depth. That's very, very
yeah,
powerful. Very
right.
powerful. Powerful, the gentle and the depth. Fantastic. Well done.
Yeah. So I mean it's okay. It's raw, it's been unedited, but it kind of segues into this micro essay that then segues into a piece that I edited last year that was part of my thesis manuscript and centers around my father and like generational lessons a little bit, but also water. So
It's interesting before you read it that
yeah,
sometimes if I'd like you to comment on this, your thoughts, obviously. Um, Sometimes folks think that people who like to read or but don't write but like to read, and there's a lot more of those, obviously, that it's just you sit down and you write a piece. Even in journalism, it has to be edited or it has to be looked at a couple of times, much less in, of course, the creative arts, whether it be in poetry or creative nonfiction or fiction or essay, etc., whatever genre you're using. The the writing process sometimes is not as hard as all of the editing and all of the rethinking and relooking and rereading that has to go into a piece. As you just mentioned, there was part of a piece that then you rewrote, that then you've been working on. I think sometimes folks have this idea that Well, the writer, I mean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez just sat down one night
Just
and wrote, 600
just
pages, whatever it is, of 100 Years of Solitude. It's the process is lengthy, not only in the writing, but certainly in the revision, isn't it?
yes. Oh, definitely. And even when I say that that's unedited, I mean that's unedited as far as like I haven't workshopped it with other people.
Sure.
I have probably changed it two or three times just as I sat down and relooked at it. And yeah, the editing process, it is. It's the hard work of writing. But it is what, really polishes the diamond, right? It takes it from something kind of rough and raw into something that is beautiful and engaging and all of that.
Do you ever get
So,
I mean, not discouraged from it, saying it, oh my gosh, I've done so much heading in this. Either I do this or I don't do this, kind of, or insert, or you think you've written a really good piece, and then after weeks and weeks of looking at it or re-looking at it and editing, you say, maybe I shouldn't do this. Is there that uncertainty at times? And
oh,
that's
definitely, definitely. And I think that's part of the most, that's the most difficult part of taking a piece from like an inspired moment or memory or feeling to a published piece is there's so much legwork in between. I don't get particularly discouraged by feedback or, like criticism. But again, I'm Azorian. I'm used to I mean, my Portuguese families are critical. So, so it's something that I'm like, yeah, I mean, you said it, I thought it already, but so I actually really appreciate feedback. Of course, as a teacher, and even going through grad school, I learned how to give definitely more constructive feedback that helps build up a person rather than just like it's easy to tear someone apart, right? Or to tear a piece of art apart and criticize all of the negative aspects of it. But I mean, really effective feedback helps an artist like bring it to another level instead of just telling you everything's wrong.
indeed,
So,
indeed. Sorry, I interrupted
oh
your
no, no, it's fine.
presentation of the piece.
Okay. So this one is a micro essays for, I'm sure some are familiar, some are not. So flash fiction is, it was big, especially I think with our modern attention spans that are very, not very long. Um, I think flash fiction has become very popular. Flash nonfiction or micro essays are probably not as well known, but I mean that's typical for all. Creative nonfiction is just not the most popular genre. Just because I think sometimes people don't know what it is. So, anyways, this also written around the same time period, or at least within the past 6-ish months. So this piece is called Drowning. Is the whole country drowning, or maybe just the huddled masses? The majority of us, those not adept at compartmentalizing, disassociating from reality, we're all thrashing around looking for oxygen. The vibe is off. How can we, how can I create beauty out of such heavy exhaustion? I know it's possible, but it seems that inspiration, like oxygen, is in short supply. What helps shake off the weight of the atrocities swirling around, committed by those who are fearful and seek to drag us all down into the depths with them? Small moments of light, things like walking through the zoo with my middle child and his seventh grade classmates, hearing them laugh at jokes that are too young for my 40-year-old ears, watching the baby elephants play on an upturned log, the death of that tree transmuted into pure joy for them. The orangutan baby dragging a blanket through the ropes course of their habitat after we humans approached the viewing deck, too close to where they had been waking slowly. It's too early and too cold for them to be gawked at from behind inches of safety glass. I feel that. Finishing stitching the ribbons back onto a duvet cover after months of layering sheets, blankets, duvet cover, and muttering, I really need to fix this. This is why your grandmother taught you how to sew. I swear I'm getting a needle and thread out today. Finding a tree loaded with the sweetest sour kumquats in my neighborhood, right on the street, with no one seeming to care if I snag a few on my daily walks. Here's an even shorter list, a faster list for darker moments when the light is hard to find. Your daily walk, the trees that form a canopy through neighborhood streets, the owls that call to each other through the dusk, another really good book available at the library, my morning coffee with its perfect balance of strong, bitter beans, creamy soy milk, and hints of sweet vanilla. Fresh baked sourdough bread, I did that. My sourdough starter, still in need of a clever name, but surviving beyond her first birthday. Figuring out how easy it is to make vegan butter. Lemons that I heap into grocery bags and give away to anyone and everyone. The sweetest clementines off my tree that you'll ever eat. Rediscovering my stash of seeds, planning out my summer garden, blossoms erupting in spring, hummingbirds hovering around my Mexican sage, young apricots, plums, figs, and peaches peeking out from protective leaves, riding bikes with my kids on sleepy side streets, listening to them laugh with each other instead of complaining, holding my husband's hand when I need to be pulled out of worry. There is so much to love in this life. Beware of those who try to make you turn your back on this one and only look towards an afterlife that may or may not follow. Don't let those who are unhappy and scared and envious rob that joy and love from you. They don't know that they can't steal that smile from your face, the contented sigh from your mouth, the laughter from your belly. These are the only things they cannot consume. Their desire cannibalizes them from the inside, but they keep feeding it the wrong things. They try to take our unions, our chosen pronouns, our pride flags, our diversity, our unity, our voices. I hope someday soon they realize that everything they need is inside somewhere deep, but they have to dig up that part of themselves that they were taught to hide or bury long ago. They have to let go of all these external things that they are clutching with white-knuckled fists. Otherwise, they will grab more and more, consume and consume and consume until all that is left is death and the Wendigo monster that stares back at them in the mirror, an empty island unto oneself.
Very
That's the
good.
end of that one. And for context, the Wendigo is a mythical, like, uh, indigenous monster who is never satiated. You might need some context to understand that bit of it, but I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you couldn't say that unless you were doing an non-creative fiction or creative nonfiction, I should say.
That's
We,
yeah.
you couldn't say this in a journalistic piece because if you said this in a journalistic piece without the art that you've put into it, it would be an ideological, whatever pamphlets, of one way.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, and you start very, you ended powerful. It goes through it very, very powerful. But the beginning, I wrote down the vibe is off, and then from the
Yeah.
vibe being off, then there's all this hope that comes to us in small daily chores or daily events or daily occurrences that we
Yeah.
forget because we're being bombarded with everything else. And that is one question I'd like to ask from that very powerful and beautiful piece, which is, and I asked the artist, also the writer of Lena this morning, what is the responsibility from your thoughts of the artist, and in this case of the artist of the written word? Obviously, all artists have that responsibility, whether you're creating a piece of music or
Mhm.
visual art. But from the written word, what is the responsibility that artists do have to live in their own time? Because that's the time that's given to them, to us, and because they are good at what they do, and because they have that connection with the written word, to say some things that normally other people could not say in another context, but to bring
Mhm.
awareness. in other words, not to say, I mean, you've described all the beautiful things that we should and I think most people do enjoy in life or looking for it in life, but you also, you know, preface it and end it, you know, and mix it with some of the ongoing things that are occurring in life. So, in a nutshell, you know, some art, every artist has a different take on it, but more and more we have artists that say, and even writers who have said this in the past, that, you know, it's their responsibility also to call some things
Mhm.
out, to bring attention to through the written word, through the artistic written word of some of the things that are going on. So my question to you is, what is the responsibility of an artist in trying times? You know, whether it be today's trying times or, you know, last decades trying times, or the trying times are always there. You know, sometimes they're
Yeah,
more trying
true.
than others, but we as a society, as humanity, you know, there are plenty of things that, you know, that have gone wrong throughout the world, as
Always.
you know, hunger and war and
Yeah.
hatred and everything else. So how do you feel that responsibility as an artist?
Well, I feel like personally, I have learned more about history and humanity from studying art and the written word than I have from history books. And even historians will cross-reference records and official newspaper journals, stuff like that, with literary pieces, with artistic pieces, because there is more freedom in art to express uh, the vulnerable, the raw feelings, the humanity of what is actually happening. We don't need to clean it up so that it is acceptable for our bosses or, whatever, whoever it may be. Um, we don't have to appear neutral. That in fact, the neutral arts, I think, would almost be pointless. Um, so I think there is a great responsibility as an artist to reflect. I mean, art is supposed to reflect back to us life at that moment, right? It's what we're trying to capture. And to avoid the darker or the uglier sides of humanity would be to do a great disservice, not only to ourselves, but to future generations, right? Because like I said, how do we learn from our patterns of human behavior if we don't realize that we've been here before, right? That humans have this tendency to swing one way or the other, and that it's not something that is an unsolvable problem or just unique to us. That we have come through problems before, that we can get through them together, um, you know, and we can make something that is difficult and dark and ugly and turn it into something that is beautiful.
Yeah, indeed.
And I think the most clever artists are sometimes like the fiction writers or the poets or even, painters who um, can depict what is happening, but they do it in such a clever way that they've been able to produce it in even we were just talking about this in my class today, in some of the most restrictive environments where artists and writers were jailed or killed because of opinions that they expressed, because of reflecting back reality of what those in leadership didn't want the world to know about. So
Indeed, indeed, and we have, of course, that in the Portuguese world with 50 years of a dictatorship, where people were either ostracized, or they couldn't publish, or they were thrown in jail. Natalia Correia, born in your island, it is your island still.
my islands, yeah.
Born on your island of San Miguel. You know, was a woman thrown in jail in the 1950s. I mean, can you imagine that in the Azores of the or
Yes.
the mainland Portugal, but the Portuguese of the 1950s and 60s being thrown in jail. And so,
Well, and that's easy to forget. That's why that is so important. Yeah. I mean, here we are. I'm, two generations later, my grandmother, when she moved to this country in 1958, she couldn't even vote in her own country, like, and so we forget that. where we came from. And even within this country too, we had, different restrictions, oppressions, and stuff like that. But
Sure, sure.
it's easy to forget without anybody recording the reality of it.
Correct. And it is easy to forget sometimes some of our own historical, as an ethnic group, and as ethnicity in the United States, our own. I mean, why did people change their names in the 1920s and 30s and 40s and, around there? Why did they go from Pereira to Perry?
Mhm.
So it's kind of, nowadays we look at it and say, did people do that? Well, there was a reason for it. Why are they not this and that? It's just
Mhm.
sometimes and that's the role of the artist to basically tell that story. I mean, I always tell, Alfred Lewis, who has
Mhm.
a very simple book called 60 Acres in the Barn. And I said, maybe there's not, there is obviously some literary value to it, lots of literary value, but even if there's not a whole bunch of literary value to it, but there is this value of telling how it was in the 1930s and 40s for the Portuguese American community in a fictional manner, but that you can relate to it. I could relate to it because at 15 I had to go milk cows with my father when we were here in this country, so I could relate
Yeah.
to Alfred's story. And so, do 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 artists continue obviously to fight? I mean, to fight when I mean to fight, to to um to have a voice in a system that sometimes doesn't want an alternative voice. And we have to be careful with that. It wasn't just in Portugal during the dictatorship. I mean, democracies have
Yeah.
been silencing people also for a long time. So from your perspective, do does one just continue even if you're fighting against the grain, quote unquote?
Well, I would say yes.
Hmm.
Uh, I
It's
would,
simple to say.
yeah, I
The
mean,
simple
it's
answer, but
simple.
yes, but it's
And
even more.
again, that is that resilience, right? You talked about Azorean resilience. And one time in an interview, in fact, I think it was for PBBI, somebody asked me, what was like the greatest quality or something that I learned from the Portuguese women in my family. And I said, resilience. It just like came out because there is a lot. I mean, and I said, and I joked, I said, whether it's, their husbands they had to endure or, difficult lives. We have such, I think a lot of the Azorean immigrants come over, a familiarity with suffering and an acceptance of suffering, that it's part of life, and it is part of life. Um, so to me, you're going to suffer either way. But the one thing, kind of like in my piece, the one thing that whoever the powers that be are, that they cannot take away from you is they cannot take away as an artist, your ability to create, your resilient spirit, the joy that you find in life. And so those things, no matter what, no matter how difficult life gets, and again, I pull this from my family, those things you have to cling onto. That's what's going to get you through, I think.
Indeed, indeed, and so when and so even if a piece just sits in a drawer somewhere or just sits, on a desk somewhere, if writing is part of who you are, it's kind of an escape, is it not, in a way?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. It's just like reading is an escape too. Um, Writing is a bit of an escape. Of course, I do think people should share their writing, and I should take my own advice there. Um, it is it's one of those tedious things, part of the process where it's no longer fun and exciting. You wrote the piece, you got your emotions out. It sounds kind of good to you, but now you got to go and send it out. So, yeah, but it gives you that momentary break. Um, from everything that is difficult that's going around or those really intense emotions. I often feel when I write, I always turn to writing. If it's a particularly difficult emotional time, um, writing, I mean, therapy probably works really well too, but writing always helps me through it. I turn to a journal, to my notebook, to, you know, um, my docs app, and it helps me process all of that. Yeah.
As
And
you
I'm sure other people feel the same.
as you were writing, one other question, I don't want to take too much time
Yeah, yeah,
of you, but one as you're writing and of course, going through the course that you did for your Master of Fine Arts and your creative piece at Fresno State as well, and of course you were involved in also the literary magazine and everything else that you were involved in the literary world. And having the experience, I mean, yes, you're second generation born here, I know that you, from what our conversations in the past, both your grandparents and then your parents, very assimilated, obviously, into the American story. But there is that ethnic piece, and you were lucky that you were, went to the Azores with your grandparents and you
yes,
experienced that with them. Um, how being in a diverse area, sometimes people don't look at the valley as diverse, but we are very diverse, and Fresno is very diverse. Uh,
yes.
how did how did you identify with other writers when you're studying and writing and reading and editing because with other writers from other ethnicities? Do you feel that there's a lot more that bridges all these different ethnicities than pull apart and sometimes even powers to be, as you said, or powers that be,
Yeah.
that want to that tear and say that there's so much division between all of us who are from different ethnicities, all of us who are sons and daughters, or grandsons and granddaughters, or even great grandsons and granddaughters of immigrants. How do you feel that about that ethnic exchange, let's say, of ideas and writing and everything else? Does that help you as a writer to kind of look at when you're talking about some of the stories that were dear to you that you like to tell and say maybe they're not as strange as I think they are because look at what's going on here, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, that's the beauty of reading, and that's why I think, I mean, many of us teachers lament the fact that people don't read books anymore, is because when you read books, when you can embody another person's story or imagine it or put yourself in their shoes, you realize that there is so much more that all humans have in common. And this is across time and place. I mean, you can read ancient literature and realize that, people millennia ago grappled with some of the same emotions and the same struggles that we grapple with today, and the same across ethnic groups. And that was one of my favorite aspects of being able to take time to really study a variety of writing. Um, yeah, because I saw so much overlap. I mean, I have a book up here, Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong, who her parents were immigrants from Asia. I can't remember the country right now, but I remember highlighting a part in there because when she described her father, I said, this is like it's like my father describing his grandfather exactly. I mean, his father exactly. So my grandfather. Um, it is a common experience, especially in America. Something that unites most of us is that, I mean, we really are a country of immigrants, right? No matter where in the line our immigrant story falls, most of us, unless you are indigenous, have an immigrant story in our family. It's just that unfortunately, a lot of those stories were forgotten, right? But yeah, we all at some point came here for the hope of a better life or a better future for our children or our descendants. So I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind, especially in these times. I mean, there's a reason that they trying to divide us, right? Because together we are powerful. When we unite, we're powerful. And our stories help us do that.
Right, and the immigrant story is so close to each other. I mean, whether you're from San Miguel, Terceira, or any other island in the Azores, or you're from an Asian island or an Asian country, or African country, or South American, the story is all the same in the aspect
Yes.
that people come for a better opportunity. If things were just great in your country, people usually don't leave their country if things are great. I mean,
No.
you and you have expressed in some of the writing I've also that you've shared in the past with us, how it it was a great opportunity for your grandparents, but at the same time, it was hard.
Yes,
It's not easy.
right. And I mean, yeah, I write about this a lot because, of course, ever since the time I was 16 and first visited, the Azores that I visited, the Portugal that I visited, is a different country than the one that they left. And so for me, I was like, well, this is crazy. Why did we come to the Central Valley? But yeah, you have to, again, if I didn't have their stories, if I didn't know, and I've learned even more now as an adult about, the authoritarian, regime of Salazar, about like the medical I knew a little bit because not only was my grandfather was orphaned by the time he was 7, both of his parents died, and it's like they didn't really know why. There was no autopsies done. Maybe they had cancer, but there was no medical treatment. Um, my grandparents lost their first son in the Azores. That's kind of the precipice, perhaps, of what made them decide to move because they moved the year after his death. Um, yeah, so and that's and that story, the story of losing a child for my great aunts and uncles. I mean, it's common throughout. Almost all of them lost a child to something, and the medical wasn't there. The Azores was this rural, isolated place, and the country of Portugal was not thriving under Salazar, right? From what I know.
wasn't it wasn't thriving. It wasn't thriving at
Yeah,
all.
but
Yeah, people
I
ask
mean, now I want to move back.
about. Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of people too with this particular.
Oh, I'm not alone. And yeah, even people with no Portuguese ancestry are enjoying the country. Yes.
Indeed, indeed. But it was a different country, and when your grandparents came, and when I came in '68, people ask me
Yeah,
all the time. My own sons have asked me when they went back as teenagers. They said, "This is a beautiful place. Why did you guys leave?" I said,
right.
"Because when I immigrated in 1968, thank God, because my family, my dad, was a professional driver. My mother, came from a family that had a little bit of land, not money, but had land, and I always had good things,
Yeah,
things like this that we take that are basics. But when I went to school, and that was one of the shocking things in my life was being at school with another. There were 20 of us basically in the second grade, and there were 7 kids barefooted. I never forget
yep,
that. I'll never
I
forget.
know.
That's and I tell that to my kids. That's why I left.
Yeah,
I wasn't one
yeah.
of those 7, but I could have been one of those 7.
Hmm.
And this was 1968, and so it's a different world. Well, Melinda, thank you so much for the time you spent with us. Thank you for the wonderful pieces that you shared.
Of
I know
course.
this is a very busy time for educators, for all of us, with all that we have to do, and you with your family, and of course your kids involved and everything that they are, I'm sure.
Yes.
Thank you for your writing. Please, so what are your plans right now? I mean, other than of course raising the beautiful family and teaching and really inspiring your students, because I was in your classroom with Catherine Vash, as some of the people that follow us might know, and Catherine even mentioned to me, we felt a very, very wonderful vibe between you and the students.
Yes.
The thing of being there and talking to them as they walked in, I mean, that's something that doesn't happen in a lot of classrooms. Unfortunately, it should, but
Yeah.
even at the college level, it should, but it doesn't. And so, besides, of course, your teaching plans and your family, what about your writing? What are some of the things that you'd like to see in the near future, or not so near?
Well, I mean, I need to be a little bit more consistent with submitting for publication, and all writers should. Um, that's something, like I said, it's one of those tedious things that gets pushed to the bottom of the to-do list. And yes, I mean, I understand that life has like ebbs and flows, and my priorities often are my family and my students, um, because I'm hopefully teaching them all how to harness their voices too as well. But I will submit for publication. Hopefully next time we get together, I will have a published piece.
Wonderful.
I have published pieces in the back, but I haven't in the past, but I haven't published my entire manuscript. So, and I'm working on a new project that does focus more on My first manuscript focused on growing up in the valley. Yes, of course, the stories of being, a granddaughter of immigrants, and all of that was woven into it. But I have some pieces that are focused on the legacy of women, I guess, in my family, and what that means to me now, especially having a daughter. So and that again is important and relevant in a time where, um, you know in in a time and a place where we are trying to diminish or to silence a lot of women's voices again. So um, I think, yeah, there I go again.
And I would love to see also your pieces and or published, of course, here. But it would be wonderful to for you to consider, and I'm doing it here in public. Maybe I shouldn't, but I will. Which is maybe submitting one or two or three or whatever pieces you would like to, and having it translated and publishing it in Portugal. And the reason I'm saying this is because first of all, you write well, and it's creative and passionate writing. And second of all, we don't have that. That is one of the lacking things that we have between the United States or the Portuguese American, especially the Azorian community,
Yeah,
the Azores. So we've have things from there translated to English, and that's important. But we don't have a lot going vice versa.
the
So
other way.
there,
Mhm.
and and although a lot of the students, and you know them, some of them you are probably your cousins now, with families too, but they read English, but they prefer reading in Portuguese. And so
Sure.
it would be also wonderful in the future to consider that so people could get to, because it's one thing if someone comes over, as we've had writers that have come over that have been here and that have written pieces about the Portuguese American experience, but we don't have many that have actually lived the experience and then wrote it in their tongue, in their native tongue, which is English, and then having them translated to Portuguese, so people can kind of get that real experience of what we have a lot about the immigrant experience. We've
Mhm.
had some good writers that were immigrants that have done some good
Oh
job.
yeah,
Well, even in the United States, writing in Portuguese, like Alfred Lewis, for example, and he wrote in both languages. But then we don't have any that have of this. I think what is lacking for us in the Azores, and I think you could really contribute to that, and a couple other writers as well throughout the United States, would be for them to understand what the second and the third generation feels like, what it's like to be, Portuguese American. Because I get this question asked there in the Azores when we do our oral history. Why are you interviewing people of second and third generation? They're not immigrants. I said, the Portuguese American experience didn't end, thankfully, with the immigrants. It continues
yes,
second and third generation. And that's the richness, I believe. So we need to look into that.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
definitely, yes.
Appreciate the time that you spent with us. Thank you. I promised that it'd be quick, but it wasn't. It was almost an hour, but it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Always a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
Yeah,
I know everybody enjoyed it as well. Thank you. Take care and
thank you,
keep on
Denise.
writing, please.
I will.
Thank you.
how you just text her.